Thank you very much, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny meeting for BCP Council. Can I welcome all those that are watching online, particularly members of the public. Thank you for joining us today, and also members of the press. A number of people joining the meeting online, but before we come to that, I'd just like to ask our Democratic Services Officer, Claire, if she would read out some housekeeping information for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If accessing via Teams and you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. If a vote is required on any items during the meeting, this will be done by a show of hands. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. And finally, please could I ask that background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We're all sat here with these masks on. We can remove them if all the members here present are agreeable to that. If anybody dissents from that, then we'll keep them on, unless you're speaking, of course. So can I have a show of hands then who would like to remove them for the duration of the meeting?
Could I just ask if we have the officers' view? Because I don't think we should remove them if some of the officers will prepare us anyway.
The instruction I've had from officers actually is that it depends on whether it's up to us, basically. So that's why I'm asking for a vote. So anyone who would like to remove them? Is there anybody that wants to dissent from that? Is there anybody that wishes to dissent from that decision?
I think you might not, but I'm not going to object if everybody else wants to say not.
Okay. Councillor Borthwick, are you?
You don't need headphones.
Do you
need to turn your microphone. Sorry, Chairman. You need to turn your microphone and camera on the laptop.
Microphone camera, yeah. It says wait for others to join. Oh, it's got wait for others to join.
You don't need to connect on your laptop.
Can I go and sit?
Certainly. Does anybody object if anybody takes their masks off? That's what we're in. Are there any objections to that? No, there's not. Okay. Thank you. And those that wish to keep them on obviously can, and they're not objecting, so we can remove them if you wish. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 1, which is apologies. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. And we've received apologies from Councillor Sean Gabriel, who has been appointed as a new member of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And for this meeting, he's being substituted by Councillor Stribley. We've also received apologies for this meeting from Councillor Farr Councillor Borthwick is substituting for Councillor Gabriel and Councillor Stribley is substituting for Councillor Farr. So that's items 1 and 2, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Claire. So which brings us to, we've already dealt with agenda item 2, so we go on to agenda item 3, election of chairman. Just a minute, members. Thank you. I seek nominations. Councillor Slade, please.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I would like to nominate you to continue in the role as chairman.
Thank you very much. Is there any seconders for that? Thank you. Councillor Kelsey, thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other nominations for chair? Okay, in that case, I'm prepared to accept your nomination, and I gratefully thank you for your vote. Thank you. Thank you, members. So now we seek election of the vice chair. Do I have any nominations for Councillor Dion?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Tony O'Neill.
Councillor Allison.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Vicky Slade.
Councillor Slade, thank you very much. Councillor Dion, do you have a seconder? Councillor Fear?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Do you have a seconder, Councillor? Thank you, Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, happy to second.
Okay, so we do have two nominees, and so we will have to go to the vote. I believe that we're now going to stop the live stream during this process. Is that right? Thank you. So I'll now call upon Democratic Services to give us the results of the election of Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard Jones, call here. I have the results of the election of Vice Chairman of the ONS Board. We have Councillor O'Neill, 7 votes, Councillor Vicky Slade, 7 votes, and 1 abstention. Proceeds to yourself as a casting vote, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Well, members, that leaves a King Solomon decision, I think, here somewhere. Yes, the casting vote is now with me, and but I just, before I actually give you that decision, I just would like to say 1 or 2 words. Tony O'Neill has been a really good Vice Chair. Whilst we've had the online meetings, it's not been possible for you all to see what he's been doing in the background, but I can assure you he's been fulfilling all of his duties as Vice Chair, and has made very constructive ideas and suggestions about the way forward for ONS. And I forged a very good personal working relationship with Tony. On the other hand, Councillor Vicky Slade and I frequently talk about the matters associated with this, the agendas for ONS. And I think it's important that this meeting, the political aspects of it, which seem to be taking priority rather too often than they ought to, her contribution as Vice Chair, I believe, could help resolve some of the animosity that we see when this meeting is taking place. And so I have a real quandary here. On one hand, I believe that there would be a useful contribution from Councillor Slade if she were to be Vice Chair. And equally, we would continue to have the continuity and excellent working relationship I've had with Councillor O'Neill as Vice Chair. However, the overriding precedent for me is actually about the suitability of ONS for its purpose, fit for purpose. And that is to ensure that we, in this very finely balanced council, make sure the opposition does have an opportunity to fully engage on the future plan, and has every opportunity for contributing with as much, at least difficulty as possible to the future of this committee. And therefore, my casting vote is to vote for Councillor Slade as Vice Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So we will now have to change places, Councillor O'Neill. We just have to quickly wipe down the desks as well, so we've got a little bit of admin to do. So if we could just do that now, thank you. Right, thank you very much, members, and congratulations, Councillor Slade, and welcome as Vice Chair. And Tony, I just want to thank you most sincerely for your contribution over the last year as Vice Chair, and it's been great, and hopefully we'll continue. Thank you. So with that declaration of interest, members, do anybody have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest, thank you. Agenda item 6, which is the confirmation of minutes and action sheet. Regarding the minutes, has anybody got any comments or amendments they'd like to make to the minutes of the last meeting? No, doesn't appear so, but we do have some actions that were outstanding, and I'd just like to quickly go through those. And these are the actions arising from the meeting on the 1st of April. Future planning in Bournemouth and Christchurch. Yes, an update report to be brought back to the board in 6 months to monitor the progress of improvements. Could I just ask Claire for a date to be put on that action? At the moment, it's just it says we need to do it in the future, but I just want to make sure that we have got a date in about 6 months' time at one of the meetings. Thank you. The next item was minute number 180, our museum, Poole Museum redevelopment. The portfolio holder for tourism, leisure and culture to provide clarity in relation to the museum operation process for council-owned museums. Portfolio holder to liaise with the chairman of the ONS board as to how this will be dealt with. Now, the portfolio holder, Councillor Iyengar, has written to me with his views on this, and essentially he has explained, and this related, I think, in the main to the charging mechanism for museums generally, as opposed to the Poole Museum, which the intent is not to charge for entry. And he explained to me that it's slightly different, the Poole Museum, in that it was more of a community facility as opposed to a pure museum, and therefore it's a slightly different concept to its use. And now I do have a full answer, which is a very comprehensive answer, and rather go through that in detail now. What I propose to do is put it on the minutes, attach it to the minutes, so you can all have a look at it. But essentially, he will be reviewing it in the future, and if there are any issues that any members have got about it, can you please write to him and explain what those concerns are or whatever. But he hasn't just closed the book on it. He's prepared to listen, and so I think that satisfies the action satisfactorily. There was another one, which was yes, it was to do with the management and development of the leisure centres, and leisure was required to respond to queries raised by Councillor Cox during non-public session regarding the business plan for BH Live. And I'm aware there's been some correspondence and discussion, Councillor Cox, between you and the accountants, whether it's fully resolved at this point or not, but I know that there is ongoing discussion about this. Would you like to comment on where we are?
Sure.
Your understanding?
I sort of sent a report to, I can't remember who now, there's a few people, and I did have a meeting with, I think, one of the accountants, and told them my concerns over it, which were significant. I have not heard anything since then.
Okay.
I have voiced those concerns to various people at various levels as well.
I have had another response from the head of leisure, who was very appreciative of the input that you put in, and says that he will take all of those issues on board, and they are all noted, and that they have been very useful in their approach to overseeing BH Live and its business plans for the future. So they thank you for that. Now, I think, there may be an ongoing discussion between you and the finance people, but I think for the purposes of this minute, we could probably close it if you're content with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I did offer to help them whenever they wanted to. So
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. So we'll close that one. Okay, so that deals with the action sheet. Public issues, agenda item 7. Claire, any public issues?
There's no public issues for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Update from the local plan working group. Now, Councillor Mike Brooke is the chair of the local plan working group, but I remain the lead member for this committee. It was agreed at the last meeting that an update would be given, and it's been discussed between various people, and it was agreed actually that the chairman could give this brief. And Councillor Mike Brooke is with us, hopefully online. And I'd like to invite Councillor Brooke to give us the report. Thank you.
Fine, thank you, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me all right?
Yes, I can perfectly. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. I'm going to make the assumption, rightly or wrongly, that you've all read the report that has been submitted, and I also want to put in a little bit of background because I understand that the previous reports have been verbal, and it may be that a little bit of additional information supporting those would be useful. So we've had 3 meetings now looking at the local plan, and that actually is 6 hours of very intensive scrutiny. The first meeting looked at the urban potential for housing, which covered all the urban sites that have been presented, and what we discovered from that work was that there was a shortfall of somewhere around 9,000 houses over the time of the plan period. Our second meeting, the officers provided information on the possibilities of increasing the density on those sites and other parts of the conurbation. And the way to look at that was through increasing the heights of buildings and also the possibility of concentrating slightly smaller units on plots of land. Overall, that reduced the shortfall from 9,000 down to about 4,500 units to be built. But what it didn't take into account was the new permitted development rights and prior approval situation, whereby developers can actually extend existing flats by 1 or 2 stories. And of course, that would represent a windfall to the council, but there's no way at this stage of knowing what that total would be. So there is possibly some potential for reducing the shortfall there, but we just have to wait and see. So essentially, there are 3 options open to the council in moving the local plan forward. And our third meeting looked at one of those options, which was the potential development on greenbelt land. But before I actually go into that in a little bit more detail, the other 2 options available are to apply the duty to cooperate, which means requesting that other councils take on board the possibility of supplying the housing units on our behalf. And the third option available to us is actually to challenge the government's model and the resultant figures that we are currently faced with. Unfortunately, at this stage in the development of the local plan, neither of these 2 options are really open to us because both require far more evidence to be collected to support their operation. And as far as the duty to cooperate is concerned, it is essential that we do look at the green belt development and exhaust the possibilities there before asking Dorset, for example, to take on any surplus or any shortfall that we might have. And the government situation, we can't challenge at this stage. If we did, it could affect the success of the local plan itself. We would have to have a whole batch of evidence available to support our reasoning for not meeting the numbers that we are expected to build. So greenbelt option is at this stage the only way forward, and it is essential that we look at the sites that have been put forward by developers and private individuals. And this we did in our last meeting, and the report makes reference to that. We also looked at the possibility of how to consult on the options with the public, and it was felt that in order to be absolutely fair to the developers, to the individuals, to the public who would be responding to the consultation, that all the sites that have been put forward should be included in the consultation process. If we failed to do that, it laid ourselves open to accusations of predetermining some of the sites, that we might have made decisions about which sites to develop before anyone had a chance to discuss them. It was also important that the consultation should be completely open, transparent and factual. And because of that, the recommendation that is before you was put forward, and we ask you very much to support that recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, just for clarity then, the recommendation is in the body of the report, which recommends that the portfolio holder for regeneration, economy and strategic planning and the planning team be to include all potential sites within the identified BCP Greenbelt as part of the public consultation. Okay, so that's one element of it. And the other element, I believe, that it was suggested that the consultation should include factual data available in order to help inform feedback regarding the impact of potentially developing the sites. I think those are the two key points. Would you agree with that, Councillor Brooke?
I would, Chair. Yes.
Is there anything else that we need to bring out in terms of that recommendation?
Not with regard to that recommendation. We are obviously going to be continuing work which the committee needs to know in relation to infrastructure developments and various other aspects before this section on housing is completed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brooke. Okay, so members, that's the recommendation from the working group. I open it up to you now for any comment or Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Mike, for his report there. I think those of us that were on the working party a couple of weeks back when we did this will realise that we had a good debate about it. I mean, we didn't all have the same views. There were many different views throughout, but I think at the end of the day we came to a fairly consensus, decent consensus on how we would move forward. And those that were able to attend the training last week that was given by the people from Southampton, from the planning, again, they stressed how difficult it is with the green belt and the different ways that we have to. Mike's done a good job putting that together, and I'll be quite happy to move forward with the recommendations on that, Chairman. I'm not really sure that there's much more that we as a scrutiny panel can add to this report at this time. I think it's quite thorough, and I think what's laid out in front of us is fairly simple for us all to read and understand.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. Is there anybody else? Councillor Devner?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I quite understand why the recommendation has come before us, but I just want to add a note of dissent from my own point of view on anything to do with, with the green belt. And can I just refer to, I can't actually see which paragraph it is. It's in the meetings, in the report. It says the issues relevant to the consideration of the consultation are whether sites are within easy reach of district centres or public transport. Fine. What development was already in place? But then, if the aims of the green belt were protected, well, it has got to be protected per se, hasn't it? So I think that I would like to make my point that I think this is quite a risky undertaking. However, I will, bow to the majority, obviously, but I think the green belt is very precious, and I think I don't know if the phrase is barking up the wrong tree, but
Thank you, Councillor Devlin. Councillor Stripley.
Thank you, Chairman. I too agree with what's been said. I do think we need to protect the green belt, but we're talking about going out to public consultation. And I think we will hear a great deal from many residents about the protection of the green belt. But looking back, many parts of our conurbation wouldn't exist if they hadn't intruded into what was then the green belt. For instance, Canford Heath wouldn't be there. Most of Broadstone wouldn't be there. Creekmore wouldn't be there. And that's only in my time in Poole. And I'm sure it's exactly the same around Christchurch and much of Bournemouth. I can remember Castle Lane being built up and everybody thinking it was extraordinary. We are also needing to concentrate on people being able to use their cars less. And if you are building, if you like, out on the periphery of our area, then that is bound to make people need cars more, because plainly they will be there before there are bus services, and not everybody rides a bike, and sometimes it isn't convenient even if you do ride a bike. But I think going out to consultation, that time will allow us more time to appreciate what is coming in under prior approval. Certainly in my area, we've had a number of applications to put an extra couple of floors onto 3-storey blocks of flats. That's causing lots of consternation, but it's prior approval. It can't go to committee because there isn't time, etc., etc. And also much office space will be automatically permitted to go to residential, as will many retail spaces. So I think the public consultation perhaps will give us better time to assess the potential shortfall that we have of several thousand, and I suspect that might be well taken up in the prior approval availability. So I'm happy to support it going to consultation, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stripley. So I'm taking it then Councillor Kelsey is moving to accept these recommendations, and you're seconding them. Then thank you, Councillor Stripley. Okay, before we go on to that, I'd just like to add a couple of things to this. One is, because we're consulting on the green belt does not mean that we are carte blanche saying we're going to build the green belt. The purpose of this is the analysis that you have to go through as a local authority to show whether you can or cannot meet the housing targets. Then you've explored every potential avenue to see whether you can meet those targets. And if you've carried out the analysis in depth and it's fully justified, then you can challenge the targets that you're set. But you've got to go through that process to start with, and it's a very important. Going to consultation does not mean that necessarily we are building on the green belt, because I know that people were concerned that the fact that it's there in the first place, that's a de facto it's going to happen. Well, that is not the case, I can assure you. The second point I'd like to make is about the working group itself. It is a sounding board only. It's enabling officers working on the local plan to bounce their thoughts and ideas off of the working group. It in no way will supersede or replace any element of the formal process of approving the local plan. So that will all happen. There are no decisions being made by the working group. It is purely a sounding board to help the process. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether I could just ask for something to be fed into your next meeting, if that's okay. And there's a comment about a meeting relating to transport, and my comment related to transport and also district centres. There's a big difference between one district centre and another in terms of its infrastructure. Two neighbouring examples, just because it's easy to see, Kimpson versus Merley. If you were talking about proximity to a district centre that has one shop and a half a post office versus a whole row of shops, I'm wondering, it's hinted that we talk about, is it close to a district centre? Well, it's not really relevant if it's close to two shops or if it's close to a centre. And I just wondered whether any weighting was likely to be given between proximity to an appropriately sized district centre. The second point is relating to transport and the fact that there may be sustainable transport and public transport routes right now, but what assurances are we going to have that by the time anything gets developed, those bus services? So it's a bit worrying if we say, well, yes, it's on a bus route, but that bus route's only 3 times a day and could well be lost if post-COVID things change. So I just wondered what consideration was being given to the security of those transport routes. And the final thing in relation to transport, but I don't think it can be taken into account, is the distance to potential extortionate costs to the council, where we develop that more than 3 miles away from junior and secondary schools, where the burden falls on the council. That actually, proximity to schools needs to be less than a mile, so that you don't then have the school run traffic from 1 to 3 miles and the ridiculous cost to the council upwards of 3 miles. And I don't know where that sits in the local plan and whether it just can be flagged somewhere. Thank you.
I think Councillor Bush, you just take a note of those points that Councillor Slade has raised and bear them in mind during the discussions that you have with the working group. But one thing, I'll give you an example where some of those issues have actually been taken into account in a very recent approval of a planning application over at Bear Wood, where part of the process did require additional bus routes to be routed through the development in the Greenbelt, and it also made additional school places at the local school, which was just within a fairly short distance. So those issues do come out in the in the planning application process for sure. Okay, if there's no other members who want, yes, Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just quickly, I feel obliged to say my usual piece on this because as a town centre councillor, because I think sometimes that there's a lot of noise from people who live near the Greenbelt or represent the Greenbelt, but actually most people live in the town centres or in the urban areas, and many of them welcome new development. I know in Poole Town we desperately need the regeneration areas to be built out, but it's got to be done in a measured way that makes those places high quality places. And I would just saying this piece really so that there's some balance in the exercise and there's to try and reduce any danger that becomes a kind of phobia against building on the Greenbelt, because if everything is thrown into the town centres and into the suburbs, we'll end up with a mishmash. We won't get as many houses as opposed to flats, and it will damage the heart of the area, which is fundamentally the towns, not the. We are an urban area. We're not a rural area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Councillor Broadhead, you're in on the meeting. Did you want to? I don't think anybody else wants to speak. I just wondered whether you wanted to make any comments before we move on.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Well, yes, just to say thank you to the working group for all the work that you've done. I know this is a recommendation to me, essentially, to make that decision. And I've been sitting in these groups as part of it. And I think you said it quite well, Chair. There's been a tremendous amount of work that's been going on in these groups, but it's been really positive. It's been really engaged. It's been, by and large, really cultural as well. I'd just like to underline the point that you made, actually, with reference to the conversations around the Greenbelt. The Greenbelt is really, really important. And if we want to protect the Greenbelt, the best way to do it is to make sure that we've done this process properly, both through exploring how we can protect it through things like urban densification, but also make sure that when we get to the final stage of the local plan that we can't be challenged, because if we are challenged because we haven't done this process in the most proper way, then actually we may well be forced into a decision to release Greenbelt that we don't want to. So this consultation process is exactly that. It's about putting it out there to the public, to be very open with the extra facts that are within there. But the actual core decision that the working group had to make was to do what Dorset Council has done and essentially pick the areas of the Greenbelt that they think is palatable for development, or whether to put everything out there for consultation. And by choosing the latter, I think that is very helpful in that A, it will give the public the full say, B, it doesn't look like we are picking areas that we would want to see developed, and C, I think it really helps in that transparency of the process so that we're not open to challenge at a later date. But thank you to the working group for all the work, and I'll be taking that recommendation on board.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. So that was the recommendation. Unless there's any dissent, then we agree with the recommendation. If there's any dissent, there's no dissent, then in that case it's unanimously agreed the recommendation to the portfolio holder. Thank you. What we got next? Okay, it's agenda item 9. Yeah, 9. Scrutiny of proposed regeneration vehicle options appraisal. And I think this is, are you going to introduce this, Councillor Broadhead, or is it, yes? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll go first. This is a joint paper with the leader, so he may well wish to add other parts after I've gone. And indeed, if there are any questions, we're both here to field answers as well as the officers. But I'll give a brief introduction. Colleagues will, I'm sure, have read the paper. But back on the 10th of March, we took a paper through Cabinet which looked at the whole regeneration structure that we've got, particularly in light of the very ambitious plans that we've got through our big plan. And looked at that in a very cold and hard way, and with the realisation that if we want to achieve the ambition that we've got for regeneration across the area, the way that we've been doing it has not worked, and that we needed essentially a big solution to the big plan, if you like. So we took a paper through in March which said, well, how are we going to achieve that? That talked about a number of options, 5 in particular, for if you really want to drive your regeneration agenda forward and really deliver on that, the different ways and the different models, the different structures that you can put in place to enable that to happen. So that was approved back in March. This is largely the outcome of that piece of work and the recommendation to choose one of those options and to take that forward to fruition. And the key points around that are within this paper, but I think point 3 in the paper says it really clearly. The outcome of that work, which was undertaken by external consultants that are very adept in this area and have done this piece of work for a number of other authorities, recognised that level of possibility that we had. We have a scale of opportunity of around 3,500 homes, around 2 billion gross development value on the council-owned sites alone, but clearly we don't have the capacity, the capability, the knowledge, the experience to do that in-house. And actually, if we want to really take these regeneration projects forward, doing it via a series of council officers not only puts added burden on the council, but actually doesn't get the relevant experience and skills from the outside world that are very adept at doing this, to take it forward and actually put it into delivery. We put a tremendous amount of extra resource into this area, an extra 1.75 million into the regeneration budget, I think around a 500% increase. So in terms of trying not to throw good money after bad, we really do need to figure out how we take this forward. So what the recommendation is going forward is that we set up our own urban regeneration company. The urban regeneration company would be wholly owned by the council. So unlike other models where it's been a public-private partnership, this would be a wholly owned council operation. And what it would enable us to do is to use that 1.75 million extra resource and make sure we get as most bang for the buck. And that's both in terms of the experience that we're getting, but also the ability to use that function to do a lot of the other regeneration related work that the council undertakes as well. The intention is that that team would be predominantly through people that are joining the urban regeneration company, to make sure that we've got that really experienced, commercially driven, delivery focused mentality throughout. And a little bit like some of the other council-owned companies, it would bring regular business plans back to the council. We would have complete strategic, if you like, control over that. So again, unlike other functions, although the company would sit over here, we would be very much strategically driving it, but having the best of both worlds, the ability to direct it, but also knowing that in order to do that, you've got to bring the brains into the function. So that's a brief outline. I'm happy to take any further questions on where we're going with this. It's a lot of deeper. The recommendation before is to delegate authority to the chief executive in consultation with the leader and I to finalise that process. We're about to have the full business case for that to take it forward, but it's pretty clear that we need to get on with this. A number of pieces of work are already underway as part of that interim team, such as the project acceleration, a lot of the analysis that will be needed as part of that as well. But happy to take any questions. And one last point to say, I just want to give a big thank you to all of those that have been involved in this very intense, very quick piece of work. In particular, the chief exec, who has led from the front on this. So thank you very much to all involved, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Leader, did you want to say anything before I open it up to the members?
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your election again. No, I think Councillor Broadhead has given a full summary. We're really excited about moving this forward. It's a priority. We funded it, and now we're putting a structure in place to deliver it effectively. So very welcome members' feedback and questions, and look forward to getting into that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Members. Okay. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Yeah, I welcome this. I think it's the right step forward. It was the direction that we were heading in when we were in Paris Unity Alliance. I think that I very much welcome the direction that there needs to be flexibility, and that this is essentially a body which will give the best advice to the council. I think it's really important that it has a degree of independence, in the sense that it has people working in it who it's their full-time job, that they're not constrained by other agendas within the council, and particularly workloads. And I think one of the dangers of in-house companies that we have is that we have officers that are pulled in many different directions, and find it difficult to allocate the necessary time sometimes to some of the roles within these companies. I do have a couple of questions though, and I think they really come under the bullet point which says it would act as a beacon for the area, attracting the very best people and partners to deliver a world-class city region, etc. The first point is, obviously we need to have somebody who is very good, who's been there and done it before, and can inspire the confidence of investors, councillors and other stakeholders. So I'm sure that is the intention, but I'm just, the way that this is set up, there's just a couple of points which would make me think, if I was, applying for that job, is it the right job for me? And firstly is the year-to-year funding. So it says somewhere in this report the funding will be reviewed year to year, and I think that is that's difficult, and I'd like to know whether that is a necessity because of council financial rules, or whether that is a choice, because I think ideally we should be giving whoever is running this company more security that the work they're doing is likely to bear some fruit in the future, and that the rug isn't going to be pulled from under them. the second point is in relation to this point about its outside impact. So is it going to be a company that advertises more widely than in the world, i.e. to the public? Does it play a role in terms of building a sense of place? Because if it does, then there's a discussion that needs to be had about how that sense of place and the image and vision for the future is developed and transmitted, because we have, it overlaps with tourism, it overlaps with culture, and it's all about that piece about how what are we as an area, as trying to advertise ourselves to the world and say, this is what we are, this is why you should come and invest here, this is why you should come and visit here. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Adam Richins wanted to come in on this. Leader, did you want to comment before him, or should I bring him in now?
Very, very happy for Adam to come in specifically. Phil and I will have comments about what they put forward. So happy to defer to Adam on Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and for those who don't know me, my name's Adam Richins. I'm the Council's Director of Finance. Just to pick up the point with regards to the £175 million is in the Council's budget a medium-term financial plan for the 3 years of that plan. So in effect, it is in our base budget going forward into the future. I think the reference in the report was a reference to the fact that, we put that in the budget for 21-22, and clearly we need to reflect when we put together the 22-23 budget as to whether that was sufficient. So I think it was more of a reflection of actually, do we get it right and does it need to be increased rather than actually it be reduced?
Thank you, Mr. Richins. Leader.
Yeah, thank you. And just to underline that, and Councillor Howell, thank you for your comments on the paper and the direction of travel. Very much so. There is a medium to long term, funding stream for this vehicle, and part of its independence will be driven through that. So we're looking at ways which we can further build that in. And one of the discussions we've had is in terms of when we get to the SLA point as to whether that should be a 3-year contract with a 3-year break effectively. So trying to get some sense of permanency to that. And in that discussion, I very much take on board your comments. So thank you. I'm sure Councillor Broadhead might want to come in on your wider questions, but I'm really pleased actually that we seem to be getting some real alignment in terms of what you're suggesting is, I guess, things to be aware of, challenges, etc. Because absolutely, this has to be led by somebody of national significance. We are getting significant interest from people who have effectively led across the country on things like projects like this. So I completely agree with you on that, and I think you'll be pleased as and when that moves forward. You also mentioned about, is it a vehicle for the public and the and a place shaping really, and yeah, absolutely, we need to land accelerated delivery. That is a non-negotiable, but it's got to be done about embedding market transformation through that real genuine high quality placemaking. And we're really committed to that, and this vehicle will deliver that. And in terms of the thinking around how it will consult and how front facing it will be, it will be as front facing as any regeneration company in the country. And if you study these, the ones that have been really successful are ones that have done exactly that. Very much embed themselves into the heart of the communities and become a part of the community. And that's very much a vision around this. So I think we're on the same page, and I welcome that. Sorry, Phil, I've gone a bit more into detail than I'd intended to, but yeah. So Phil, anything you wanted to add to that?
Okay. Members, I think it was Councillor Cox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a few comments and a few questions. The first, I just wanted to comment on what Councillor Howell has said and some of the responses. You know, I thoroughly agree that the financing needs to be in place for 3 years and be seen to be in place. And I think Councillor Miller has already talked about a service level agreement, which is absolutely right. That, you know, there should be a service level agreement with the company so as to guarantee its income for the next 3 years. And presumably, I would suggest that, you know, there should be some sort of profit sharing scheme that, you know, it's not just a fixed level. They need to have whoever you're going to get once is going to be, as you've already said, very high level, and presumably want to be remunerated accordingly. And I think we need to be transparent about that and upfront about it so that we all know what they're getting. One thing in terms of the is really a comment and a warning, I suppose, is one of the benefits that has been put forward here is the adaptability and the flexibility of the scheme. But I have to say, one of the dangers on top of it, there's a flip side, and that's to do with accountability. And if you can be very flexible and adaptable, that also means that your accountability can suffer, and that the things might not happen as the way that we would want them as a council to happen, and therefore that's just really a warning. There's one of the points that has been raised is about the secondment of staff, which I found quite surprising given the comments that you've made about not having the resources within the council to do this. And what I would suggest, and I'm not against council staff going in and being part of the team, but what I would suggest is that they should leave the council. They should go and work for the company. There shouldn't be a secondment. You know, if they want to work for there, they should work for there for the 3 years. So there should be a transfer. That's it. You know, they now work for the company, not the council. And then, you know, so that they know where their opportunities lie effectively. One of the points I just wanted to make was in terms of the consultation with the rest of the council, and I noticed that the recommendation here is that we delegate authority to the chief executive in consultation with the leader or the deputy leader. You know, it's setting up a company that should be relatively straightforward. But what I would like to suggest is that gets broadened slightly to the chair of the Review and Scrutiny Committee, and maybe his deputy as well. So there's consultation is seen to be across the council quite clearly. And as has already been said, that I think will bring a much bigger buy-in, not just by members of the council, but also by outside stakeholders who will see the council working together, and not just administration. One of the other points I just wanted to make was that I see absolutely no reference at all to climate change, and I would like to see that this company has some responsibility to climate change. We all signed a climate change agreement. God has spoken, and there has been no, and I would like to see it as part of the remit of the regeneration scheme, is that we do look at transport, and we do look at how we change our behaviours going forward in order to ensure that we fulfil our obligations under our climate change.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Well, there's a couple of suggestions in there for you. Councillor Broadhead, you want to make any comment on those?
Yeah, a couple. I agree with a lot of the points that have come through, and it's great that there's a lot of positivity on and a recognition of that this is the right way to achieve things going forward, particularly around getting that extra experience and that we need. Councillor Cox talks about the flexibility and the dangers of that. I think the reason for the term flexibility is as much as anything else about assuring that this essentially umbrella company has the necessary flexibility to deliver in the very different ways that regeneration projects need to be delivered. When we took the paper back in March, we talked about the 5 different areas that we were exploring as part of this process of how you could deliver projects. And actually, they're not mutually exclusive. So I think that flexibility is a recognition of the fact that by doing it this way and having a council-owned company that does very much sit apart from the council, but takes on board all of the strategic directions, such as things like climate change that Councillor Cox talks about, within that, it retains the ability to look at different ways of delivering. So within the function that's being created here, there is still the option for direct delivery. So to use that actual urban regeneration company to take a council-owned site from cradle to grave and actually essentially build it. There's also the flexibility within the mechanism to enter into joint ventures. So some of the very large strategic sites, the power station site, it's pretty unlikely, even with a well-resourced urban regeneration company, that we're going to build it ourselves. So we will probably likely need to enter into a joint venture, and that possibility is there. And again, on the strategic partnerships, if we really want to do this and do this properly, you know, we recognise the fact that this is going to get some impact. This is £2 billion of council-owned sites, which is going to make a significant difference and get some attention. So partners that we will want to work with, such as Homes England, will need to be engaged as well. So I think that's where the word flexibility comes from. It's about making sure that we're not just closing all the avenues off and making sure that, yes, we're resourcing this properly and getting the right talent in, but we're not closing the doors on delivery mechanisms going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. There was a suggestion about the accountability, and the suggestion that myself or Vice Chair or both form part of the group that looks at this. When you, I think, what does it actually say? Approval. The approval process at the moment is delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader and the Deputy Leader to set up the. And I think the suggestion was that there were some other people in that process. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll take advice from others on it. I know when I was chair of the Overview and Scrutiny board, I got some pushback about being involved in the decision-making process, because being involved in decision-making precluded being involved in the scrutiny. So I suppose there's that question mark. The aim of doing this is as much as anything else to get on with pace, but also recognition that we're pretty close to the solution on this anyway. But again, I'll take advice and guidance from others.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say, when I read the paper, and I was starting to wonder why you were setting up a company when virtually everything has got to be rubber stamped by the council in some way. So I think that built into your thoughts is a lot of accountability already, I have to say. But you know, it may, and I also noticed that the governance arrangements are yet to be determined, which is another issue, and I would imagine that there would be some kind of board representation by members on the company board, which in itself would provide some accountability and communication channels. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think you're completely right. And again, you know, this is an iterative process. I don't think we're going to get to the full function on day one, and we're going to need to pad these things out as we go. But yes, completely. I think that as part of the governance. And also, I noted in the paper, and somebody else commented to me, it talked about bringing the business plan for this back once a year. We're going to need, as an authority, to be much more involved in that. There'll be that direct involvement on a day-to-day basis by key individuals, surely, but also with the wider membership as well, as we look to really start decisions as part of that process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miliol, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to go back to basics, really. I was quite surprised to see the inability of one of the council's existing vehicles, like Seascape or Bournemouth Development Company, being extended to include a regeneration vehicle, because I'm sort of thinking that would save on the HR and the admin and the investment of having to set up a brand new company. But obviously, from the matrix, it shows that really the URC is the only option. But I was hoping you could explain a bit more about where the URC would sit in Seascape and some of the other council companies. Is this more about strategy rather than delivery? And one final thing, just to echo what the chair said, I'd be really keen to see a business plan or a business case come back to the committee when that's ready, so we get an opportunity to feed into that as a scrutiny board. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, I'll go first, and then the leader may wish to add more. The answer is yes. This is a predominantly about strategy, but it's also about delivery as well. So I think that the intention here is that recognition, as we said at the earlier paper, that we don't have the capacity in house to deliver on some of this stuff, and actually by taking it into a council-owned entity over there, it actually is more helpful in some ways as well. But actually, it's also about putting in one place some real strategic talent, as Councillor Howell says earlier on, making sure that we get some real brains on this, people that really know what they're doing. And the beauty of having it all in one place is that it helps in what I've started to think of as a strategic kind of chessboard of some of the sites that we've got as well. If you work in these projects in a very siloed fashion, then that doesn't enable sometimes the big thinking that needs to go in to go, actually, hang on, is this in the right place? Is there a better way of doing this? And we've got a number of sites where we can move those chess pieces around. But also, to pick up directly on Councillor Earle's point, it can essentially serve, as I mentioned earlier on, almost as the intelligent client for a lot of the strategic regeneration thinking across other areas of the council. So, for instance, you take the BDC model, which is similar but very different. That was born out of a time where the preceding authority was asset rich but cash and resource poor. So we had the land, but we didn't have the ability or the money at the time, the resource, to actually bring in the necessary thinking and experience. So that was why that was a joint partnership with another, with an outside body. I think there's still a gap sometimes with the bigger strategic direction. Now that sits in a much bigger picture across the whole BCP area. Alongside, as I mentioned earlier on, some of the issues that we have within the local authority, not just about resource, but about big strategic thinking about some of our housing sites. The council's very good at delivering housing sites, pure housing sites, but they do fit into the bigger jigsaw puzzle, and I think this function can and should help with that as well.
And Councillor Earle, are you content?
Just the other question about seeing a business case when we can.
Yeah, business case presentation.
Shall I come in terms of the governance just as a general point? And welcome that, absolutely. Phil's already said effectively that we're going to have to be much more involved in that as a council than and just intermittently seeing stuff. This is a 100% owned vehicle. It's a 100% owned council vehicle. So ultimately the council membership will be a key part in that governance, and the council's overview and scrutiny committee, audit and governance committee at different points will have absolute opportunity to scrutinise and change and adapt the business plan and the governance framework as we move forward. But we're going to get it started and we're going to get it going, and then we're very much welcoming feedback as and when it comes. So yes, in a short answer, Millie, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm actually very pleased to read this report and see that we're moving towards action, which I think is critical for further or attracting further and future inbound investment. I do have two questions. First of all, 5 options were declared in the report, and there is a selected option, but the report also suggests that other vehicles might be used. Does this suggest that the review of the options was rather inconclusive, or is there a rationale for other uses? And the second question is, how is the URC different from the Bournemouth Development Company and Morgan Sindall relationship, where I also understood that on profit sharing there were tax advantages? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, I can answer both of those. Firstly, on that options, as I mentioned earlier on, it's not a binary choice with these options. So fundamentally, and I talked about flexibility earlier, we need a way that we can bring that talent in. We can maximise the use of this extra resource that we're putting in, but we can also maintain the flexibility to deliver in the way that each regeneration project will want to do. By having the Urban Regeneration Company, as I said earlier on, it doesn't rule out things like joint venture, strategic partnership, etc., which some of those other options, talk about. However, if you'd picked one of those, it would have probably ruled out other things. So if we just decided to take all of our sites and put them into one big joint venture, it wouldn't have enabled us, for instance, very easily to directly deliver some of the more easily deliverable ones. It would have been harder to enter into strategic partnerships, or dare I say, even different joint ventures if they were right for other sites. So really, it's just about flexibility, and the model that we picked here, which has come from the external advice and a lot of external work that's been done, is clearly the most benefit of the most benefit as outlined in that table. On the BDC, as I mentioned earlier on, the BDC was different. It came out of a time, as I'd said, where the council, the proceeding authority, didn't feel that it had the resource in-house to put the extra money in to recruit the external talent. So the arrangement of the BDC at the time was to take a number of sites that the former Bournemouth Council had. We put in the land. We formed a joint venture public-private partnership with an external developer, in that case Morgan Sindall, who put in essentially some resource and experience in the brains, and then all of the profits of that were split 50-50. So a different type of model. We're in a different place now. Through our most recent budget, we've unlocked a lot more extra resource, so we can fund this ourselves. We're not reliant on external resource coming through from anybody else. And because we're doing it that way, and because this will be 100% council-owned business, whose essentially the business case and the money to operate this essentially comes directly from the council, we also don't need to worry as much about things like the tax benefits of the entity going forward. Now, that's not to say that that this won't evolve in the future. So obviously we've got a plan for what we want to achieve right now. We don't intend to see any property going into this company. We'll retain the property ownership in the council. But as time evolves, if things come up which are a better idea, then obviously by interaction with the local authority and with the council and through the correct decision making, again, we've got the flexibility to change if needed. But I think I'm really confident if we can get this up and running, hopefully in a matter of weeks, and I think we're nearly there, we can really start to hit the ground running and get really strategically move forward some of these sites which are incredibly exciting for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stripley.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, Overview and Scrutiny needs to give its well thought out and well discussed decision or recommendation that will certainly be taken into proper consideration by the final decision makers, which under the Constitution is delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader of the Council. I suspect that the Chairman and Vice Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny Committees probably have no place in that final decision. But, and I'm sorry to be critical here, I believe you should not have picked up on an off-the-cuff decision and promoted it without any discussion amongst members of this committee. You ignored all 14 of us in the suggestion that you and the Vice Chairman should be in that final decision. I thought Overview and Scrutiny discussed things properly and put it through. It was an off-the-cuff remark, and you presented it as though that's what this committee was suggesting, and we've not had a word of discussion on it. It might be the final recommendation, I don't know, but I'm quite disturbed if that's the way things are happening here. So apologies for giving my opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stripley. I don't actually recall anybody proposing formally that that would be a solution.
No, but Chairman, you presented it as though it were.
Through the chair, please. Thank you. Are there any other members that wish to speak? Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It isn't particularly a question because I think it's all been explained very, very well. But I just want to really put a comment, I think, that we've got the appraisal criteria in our paper here. 6 criteria were used, and I must say that I'm very pleased to see that at the top of it is value for money, and I think that's really essential with what we're doing here. I think that comes back to what people have said, other councillors have said about the accountability. But the whole thing is going to be clearly run on public money, and we have a big task before us to make sure that we do get value for money, because there are comments about, I think it's accelerated delivery, I think is in 10.3, and comments about this has got to be done at pace. Well, I know from experience with other situations that sometimes when you do things at pace, you do sometimes lose the value for money aspect of it. So my comment would be that I welcome this. I think it's a good scheme, as long as we do cling to the value for money side of it, which I'm sure the leader and Councillor Broadhead will be taking under consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Devman. There be no other members. Oh, sorry, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, really, just so I can understand some of the things which have come up. Why is it? So it states in the paper that we haven't yet had the final business case, and that it's hoped that will be in by the end of May. But we seem to have a final sort of decision about which is the right option. If the business case hasn't been completed, how can we be sure that this option is going to be the right one? Would it not have been sensible to delay until the next cycle, so that we actually had the business case in place to know this was the best of the 5 options in front of us? The second question I have is about the timeline. You said that we're close, but I wasn't sure whether you meant close on the business case or close on the timeline and when this is likely to be set up. I think it is important that we do look at the governance, and I think there are options around, you know, getting a broader member input into that. But I would leave that for you to come back and put options forward about what you think is the best. Is there an intention to keep all of the existing BDC sites in BDC? Do we have, is there any risk around the relationship with Morgan Sindall about, you know, what does this mean for that relationship and that business plan? Because I know there was some talk about reviewing the business plan. And finally, what is the role in your eyes of master planning? Because we've had sort of conflicting views about whether master planning is a good thing or not. But if this is about strategic direction, I would have expected it to have some thoughts around the role of master planning of the sites and of the towns more widely. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks for those questions. First is around that business case, and I think we've got to be careful of not confusing two things here. I think it's pretty clear from the work and the work that the consultants have done and the extensive work that officers and a number of us have been partaking in, that the option, which option is the preferred option. There's no other way of cutting it. By setting up an urban regeneration company, particularly in the situation financially that we find ourselves in, that option is the clearest option moving forward. So really, I think that is without question. What the business case will do is just go into some of the more finer detail about the initial functions and structure of that function. So I don't think there's anything coming out in the business case work that will go, oh, actually, we should be entering into a strategic partnership instead. It's more about essentially the nuts and bolts. So hopefully that answers that question. Secondly, about its relationship with the BDC. At the moment, we are only considering the non-BDC sites to be taken forward in its entirety by the Urban Regeneration Company. As I mentioned earlier on, it can and should be our brains for regen full stop. So I expect it to have some really good interaction with the BDC, particularly when we're talking about the wider aspirations for our area and dare I say that strategic chess piece that I mentioned earlier on. There may well come a question in the not foreseeable future about, right, let's have a look at the totality of the sites in the BDC. Does that work going forward? Should there be more? Should there be fewer? Should we be having a bigger input for the Urban Regeneration Company? That can come next, but it's not necessary at this stage. But clearly that was probably the right time to have that conversation as well. But as it stands, they are two very different entities. The final point about master planning, I completely agree with. I think Councillor Say is probably referring to the fact that I've been a bit critical on some of the master plans in the area, particularly because they haven't put enough focus on addressing things like deliverability, viability, transport, etc. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their place. It just means that if you do this in the commercial way that the commercial world would do in the regen world, you make sure that as part of that master planning, you're taking them into consideration right at the very beginning rather than leaving it at the end. I've come out of a meeting this morning of a different project that I inherited with a master plan that didn't do that, and unfortunately has left us in a position whereby we're now having to grapple with some real difficulties that wouldn't have happened had we been able to embed that deliverability in the beginning. So yes, master planning is really important, particularly for getting that strategic direction, but it has to be done in a way that thinks about deliverability right at the beginning. We haven't been doing that. Local authorities aren't very good at doing it. We can get some amazing people in to drive this forward. I'm really confident we can get that embedded in.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Any other members? Okay. Well, the recommendation in the paper is whether, is to support the Urban Regeneration Company. Then it's about delegation, and then it's about who's that's delegated to. Those are the three elements of the recommendation going to Cabinet. There's been questions around it. I've not heard other than a suggestion from Councillor Cox around the accountability issue, which I assume is part of the delegation or the authority issue. But of course, it does say in the paper that it's all subject to the information required contained within the report. So I think my question is, at what point do we get visibility that the information that you've got in the report can then support the delegated authority to just go ahead? Does that make sense, Councillor Broadhead?
Yes, I mean, I'll be led by obviously this is a recommendation to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader and deputy leader. So I don't know whether the Chief Exec wishes to add anything at this time. I'm certainly confident with the work that I've seen that we're hopefully in the position to arrive at a point to set this up, which is what we're talking about at this stage. And I will give the commitment right here, right now, as the leader has done as well, that this is not the end game. This is going to be an ongoing, evolving process. Not only will we want to involve other members and particularly the Urban Scrutiny Board in that process, but we'll need to, because this is the start of a really exciting regeneration journey that we'll need to take people on. So the business case and setting this company up is not the end game. It's just the beginning, but I see the Chief Exec put his hand up.
Yeah, before I bring you in, Chief Exec, could I just ask Councillor Cox, because it may be that you'll be able to answer a further comment from him whilst you're at it. Councillor Cox.
I think my suggestion was that you were involved in the consultation bit. That the leader and the deputy leader are being consulted by the Chief Executive, and therefore I was suggesting that consultation is extended to yourselves as part of that process. And I think that's important because, as I said before, that this I think this requires a buy-in from everybody across the political divide, and in order to make it successful, it's always best to start off as you mean to go on, and therefore there should be full consultation throughout. Thank you.
Okay. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really just to emphasise that I think the coming together of the business plan is really just the last piece of making sure we've got everything in the same place, making sure we've got the legal advice about structures and all that. So the recommendation to Cabinet, I think, actually sets out where we want to be. It's just a case of having the fine details of that ready to go. So my take is, I mean, it would be unusual for us to involve the Chair of Overview Scrutiny in that decision making, just to pick up that point, because we tend to ensure that you are there in order to hold the executive to account. So that would be an unusual measure. Normally, we would only involve either yourself or the chairman of the council, for example, on an urgency decision. And that's not normally about the decision. It's about the reason for urgency. for, in terms of emergency using powers and things. So my sense is we will have, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will have the details together that will allow us to make the principal decision about the company. But actually, that isn't making any decision about any of the sites. And those will be made through the normal council decision making. I think as Councillor Broadhead explained at the beginning, and both himself and Councillor Mann have expanded on. So my sense is actually the decision to set up the URC in terms of the detail of it isn't that big a decision, following if Cabinet are minded to, if you like. The bigger, more important decisions are going to be about individual sites, and those that is set out in the report would have to come through the normal council decision-making processes.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Exec. Yeah, so I think where we're coming from, this is just about setting up the company initially, not about the big things that come after it in terms of its business plan and sites and all the rest of it. And I've not heard any reservations expressed from anybody here about the setting up, or the concept of setting up this particular company. And that's what we're delegating, I think, to Chief Exec and Leader and Deputy Leader to do, to set up the company. And Councillor Stribley, you're nodding your head, shaking your head there. Did you want to come in, please?
Yes, Chairman, it's my understanding that Overview Scrutiny simply makes recommendations. We're not delegating anything to anybody. And that is why I think it's, although I appreciate the motive behind Councillor Cox's suggestion, is that in fact it's unconstitutional, and I think the Chief Executive is absolutely right. The final decision will go through Cabinet, and unless the Unitary Alliance has changed its position previously, I mean, Vicky Slade is on record as saying she would never work with a Conservative, so or cooperate. So I don't know why there's this sudden move that you require to be consulted by the Chief Executive when he's about to make a decision.
Councillor Stribley, I think we haven't accepted that, or indeed is it now being proposed? What we're saying, and I would agree with you. Actually, I don't think it is the place for either me or the Vice Chair to be involved in those decisions. But I think, at the point at which overview and scrutiny is required as a board is to look at the business plan when it eventually comes forward, and the sites and all the investments and everything that will follow the establishment of this company.
I'm absolutely with you on that one, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Slade.
Yeah, I need to come back on that, because I think that was an outrageous statement, particularly as this is being live streamed to the public. At no stage have I ever said I would never work with Conservatives. I've happily worked with many Conservatives. I've appointed many Conservatives, including your colleague Councillor Kelsey, as the Armed Forces champion. So I think that was an unnecessary statement and an untrue statement. I was very happy to work with Councillor John Beasley when we were on the board together for Seascape, and would do so at any time with the right people. So I think that's wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Okay, so back to the recommendation in the paper.
Am I able to? I've raised my hand. Am I able to speak?
Sorry, sorry, Lead. I've not. Yeah, he has. You've put your hand up. Sorry, can't see that.
I can't see that.
Go ahead.
Do apologise, Chair. I appreciate we'll get into this. Just, Chair, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but just for some clarity and to support Councillor Stribley's statement, Councillor Slade did write an email to me saying that most of her group wouldn't work with Conservatives when at the start of the pandemic I offered to our assistance in working. So just from I think it was a point of fact is Councillor Stribley's actually right, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Right, we'll go back to the point under discussion now, and that is this paper. And as I was trying to summarise, that we basically, from what I see, do support the paper. And there's been a fair amount of debate about what happens subsequent to this company being formed. And I'm sure that Councillor Broadhead will have taken all of that on board. And I'm sure this committee will be making sure that he does at some stage. So I would like to now move on. And unless there's any recommendations about what we've got here, and I don't see anybody making them, so I think we've probably done this to death now, and we should move on. Sorry? Members, I think it's about time we had a 5-minute break. So if you could just stop the live stream for a few minutes and let's get back. Thank you. Okay, so now we come to agenda item 10, scrutiny of homes-related cabinet reports. And this relates to the establishing of a multidisciplinary team in a homeless health centre. And I believe Councillor Robert Lawton is here to introduce this paper to us. Thank you, Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's thunder and lightning where I live. It's pouring down here over in Southbourne, so don't come over here unless you've got an umbrella. Right, the proposal set out in this report will help address inherent inequalities and ensure good access to services for those who are marginalised and hard to reach. The paper outlines recommendations to continue the development of the shared care or multidisciplinary approach, which has been continuing for the last 2 or 3 years. Firstly, to further develop a multidisciplinary approach that homeless individuals can access and receive support they need to find accommodation and have their health issues and needs addressed. Secondly, to establish a homeless inclusion health centre, or as we call it, the Health Hub, which provides a building-based homeless health and housing centre. Services will be delivered to those who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. For example, those people in temporary hotels or hostel accommodation. One final thing I'd like to say before is that the Hub will provide an important service to go in conjunction with the homeless strategy, which is out at the present time for consultation. We expect the Hub to support the Council's key 3 performance indicators, which are set out in the homeless strategy, which the main one is reducing and stopping the cycle of homelessness. First aim is reducing the rough sleeping, increasing households who have prevented from homelessness or being prevented from homelessness, and improving the health and well-being of people impacted by homelessness. I've been doing homelessness for a number of years, especially under the old Bournemouth Council and again now. And one of the major factors we find with homeless people is they tend to look upon the council as a difficult thing to approach. And I believe that this homeless hub, health hub, will help us do as an inroad into help people and help them get back into society. I cannot take all of the credit for this. The major contributor to this report has obviously been Hazel, who, as we all know, is a nurse at the Royal Bournemouth Hospital. So I'll if it's okay, Chairman, or through yourself, I'll hand over to Hazel.
Yes. Hello, Councillor Allen.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm actually in 2 meetings right now because the other meeting that's going on is around the MDT, and we're making great progress about how everyone's going to be working together as a sort of a wide team from lots of different organisations: physical health, mental health, social care, hospital-based services, community-based services, and the hub is going to be the centre of this service, having a central location with outreach across the conurbation and in reach into other natural hubs like Roots to Roots in Poole. There are services like this across the country that are very successful, and actually quite a lot in the south of England. There's a homeless health provision, primary care provision in Southampton, Brighton, Bristol, Exeter, and similar setups. This is specifically going to be a hub where people can go, particularly when they have complex needs, they are needing a lot of support, maybe in crisis, and it's trying to have a holistic, person-centered approach and a wraparound to look at all of their needs so that you're not missing out on one thing where you might be sorting out 90% of their issues, but you've missed out on the one thing that actually then means that they don't succeed. And health, as we know, is central to people's ability to get off the streets, move on, and hopefully get settled into housing and maybe get back into work. But you can't really do that if your physical or your mental health is a significant issue. So it's about putting all those things together, but it's about having social care there. We're addressing their housing needs as well. It's a one-stop sort of front door, and it's also the benefit is that actually Our residents will know that we're committed to supporting people that have either rough slept or are at risk of homelessness or are temporarily housed. Traditionally, they don't access what we would consider to be our normal access to primary care. They're not very good at attending their GP. I don't know about you, but through COVID, it's been quite a challenge getting access to primary care. And I think that you've only got to put a few barriers in the ways of people that have these complex needs and that they don't access services in that way. So the MDT and the hub would look after those people until they were settled in more sustained housing, and then we would gradually hand them over to what we would consider more traditional primary care provision. So it's about wrapping around services, it's about a single point of access, and it's about supporting these people to move away from homelessness. And it's an opportunity to bring all those services together under one roof, as I say, as a central point to work right across the conurbation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Members, open it up for debate. Councillor Edwards, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly welcome having this health hub, and I do know that the Health and Adult Social Care Board will be looking at how it's working sort of further down the line once it's been established to sort of iron out if there's any problems or anything. But my question is actually relating to the refurbishment of the building that's been purchased. And it's a comment really that I would certainly like to see some green technology being installed in that refurbishment of the building, if that is at all possible.
Can I just come in before you answer that, please? There was a confidential element to this paper, so I just, if we want to go into that element of it, then we'll have to go into closed session. So I don't know if we will need to, but we haven't crossed that point yet. But I just flag it up that if you want to, we will have to go into closed session. Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen?
We're very lucky that actually this hub is not just a BCP idea. We're working with businessmen, we're working with charities, we're working with the church. It's a real community project, and there is an expectation that we would like it to be green and to look at how we can potentially incorporate some of those things within the refurbishment, because like you say, it is an opportunity. And that certainly is the vision of the businessmen that we're working with, and I definitely endorse that. We're not at any stage of sort of pinning down the details yet, but it's certainly going to be something that we will take into account. Thank you.
Content. Okay, Councillor Rigby, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I really welcome this paper, and I think it's something which our towns have been crying out for some time now, and I'm really happy to see this. I know this is an extension on some work which was done by the previous portfolio holder as well, who was looking at, I believe, a different building for this. But my question's a bit more around the service rather than the building itself. Is there anything which would stop individuals being able to access this health hub service with the services which we've got now? There's certain points like which restricts homeless particularly difficult to manage and access individuals and getting the help they need because of problems they may have with drug use or other addictions, things like that. There's a point here, point 24, which says need to ensure services provide assertive support and do not sustain and perpetuate people's marginalised lifestyles as an unstructured drop-in centre. So I'd just like some reassurance that this would be available to be accessed by anyone who needs the assistance, and there'd be nothing preventing them from actually dropping in to receive any support which they need at the time. Thank you.
Councillor Allen?
Yes, so I think that what we need to, I just need to sort of probably make it clear, is that if you're running any sort of service, you are going to have to manage people's time as effectively as possible. So there will be sessions where people are there, the doctor, the nurse, the podiatrist, for example, and then we will need to make appointments and encourage people to attend. However, what we're hoping is within the hub, there will be a welcome and that will be available pretty much throughout the week, and I haven't thought about weekends yet, but we would look at that, where literally somebody could walk in the door and start the conversation, have a cup of tea, start to think about what services they might want to engage with, get them booked in. And certainly somebody that has addiction issues, drug and alcohol issues, that's certainly not going to be something that would stop them from accessing. In fact, it's the very opposite. And we've recently got some excellent drug and alcohol funding for specific services around people that are homeless, around drug and alcohol, because we found during lockdown it was one of the things that we really felt we could have done more around. And I think people were coming into accommodation and they were settled and they wanted to get on opiate substitute prescribing, and there was a little bit of a wait and a lag, and that didn't help. So so the answer to your question is there will be a welcome open door drop-in service, but they may not be able to drop in and see a doctor or a nurse immediately if that doctor's busy or if there's not a session on. So it's going to be a mixture of appointments and drop-in. And certainly if somebody dropped in and someone else hadn't turned up, it's going to be very flexible, but it's going to be a combination. What it's not going to be, and I think maybe that's why it's referenced, is it's not going to be a drop-in centre where people will stay all day and have a cup of tea and have lunch. And it's not a social club. It's a place of business. It's there to support people to meet their needs. So that might be why that reference was made. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the important bit, just people being able to get through the front door and being able to seek out that assistance. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Cox, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Councillor Lawton and Councillor Allen. I think this is a great paper and congratulations. It's probably long overdue. I just wanted to raise a few points, and the main one really, I suppose, being an accountant, I always look at the bottom line, and there's a fairly large unfunded pressure there of £100,000 a year, which does concern me when it comes to sustainability of the project. And on that basis, given that you've already just said that there's businessmen and charities getting involved, which is fantastic, should we not be looking for something like a sort of special purpose vehicle charity to house this within? And provide them with opportunities to get extra income in towards it from different sources, because that would, in my opinion, lever open more pots of money from different sources, not just from the council.
Yes, we're definitely looking at how we structure the ongoing development of this service and whether we partner with the third sector. And you're right, because as soon as you take it away outside of the council, then we potentially have a lot of opportunity to bid for grant funding, and we're hopeful that actually some of that might be an opportunity even for the refurbishment of the property. So yeah, we're looking at exactly what the structure is going to be, because I agree with you that that does open up a lot more of opportunity, and it doesn't just then sit with us as a council as a cost pressure. However, we have had conversations with MLCHG. They're aware of our plans, and that we are confident that there would be the sort of basic revenue stream that we would need to maintain this service. Thank you.
Councillor Lawton, did you put your hand up? Did you want to come in on this?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank Councillor Cox for his kind comments? And can I reiterate what Hazel has just said? Is that one of the major things obviously is funding for this and ongoing funding. One of the things we will do is there is a flat above which we will rent out. Will give us some income, not the 100,000 a year, but give us some income which will contribute towards that. But the major benefit of it is that, as Hazel has just indicated, in our conversations with MHCLG, we've already indicated to them that we're committed to spend some monies there, council's monies there, and by demonstrating that commitment to them, they have indicated that they will give us some funding towards that. They've also, as Hazel has indicated, that hopefully we will use some of the other charities to give us some monies as well. But with this is an innovative scheme which we're trying to break the terrible cycle of homelessness, which has blighted our towns for a number of years now. And I believe this is a good scheme, a helpful scheme, and hopefully will achieve what we aim to do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Orton. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Chair. And I totally agree with everyone else. I think this is a really wonderful scheme, which all of our communities will benefit from, but particularly those who are most vulnerable. But just to echo what Councillor Cox has said around possibly joining with other third sector or outside organisations, I think there is, when we look at the recommendation for this paper, it is to approve acquisition, but that's not it at the moment. It's all sitting within the council, so I almost feel like it's a bit premature to approve the acquisition without, and particularly as we have the restricted content in this paper, so we know a little bit more about it, but I think there are opportunities, particularly around the refurbishment and the acquisition, not just for organisations like the NHS or the CCG, but also for charities. Like, I know residents would really perhaps want to contribute to this sort of to the health hub. Homelessness and rough sleeping is something that many people are concerned about. So I think there is a lot more scope, rather than the council having to raise or fund it in the way that it will be funding it, for us to be able to look a bit more at those initial capital costs in conjunction with a charity.
Yeah, Councillor Lawton.
Yeah, I think I understand what Councillor Earl is saying, and it's a good point. So, so thank you for your contribution. It is an initial outlay, and it is a unit which will obviously be council. It's an asset which will be owned by the council, but it's not going to have be run by the council. It's going to be run by various agencies who will be in-house there. One of the difficulties, as I said in my opening statement, is that people who are rough sleeping have an inbuilt suspicion of councils. And we find it's difficult for them to knock on our door, wherever that is, whether it's in Christchurch or Bournemouth, and for us to try and help them. So it's a difficult situation, but I believe that this health hub will go some way to helping us to help people, along with charities, as Councillor Earl has rightly said, in helping people and helping us to try and break that terrible cycle of people being rough sleeping on our streets.
You content, Councillor Earl?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I have some. Councillor Howell?
Yeah, it does kind of relate to the confidential section, but it doesn't discuss any numbers. It's more about the process of acquisition. So I'm not sure whether it's actually a confidential question I'm going to ask, but I'm just a bit wary because the question's been jogged by a statement in the confidential section.
Okay. Can I just hold that one just for a moment?
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Councillor?
I did, but I think mine's probably confidential as well.
Okay. Well, we'll come to those in a minute, if you don't mind, because I do have a couple of general questions myself before, and then we'll go into confidential session to look at those financial ones. And my first question is, and I'm assuming from the paper, although it talks about homelessness and families, etc., it's really focused at people that are either rough sleeping or have been placed in temporary accommodation in terms of either hostel or bed and breakfast accommodation. I just want to clarify that to start with, if I may, Councillor Allen.
Yes, it's for anybody that's rough sleeping, anybody at risk of rough sleeping, and anybody that's vulnerably housed. So it covers the broader section of homelessness, but certainly we do tend to find that those that are the most vulnerable and with the most complex need often are the ones that may well have recently been rough sleeping or are currently rough sleeping. So it's a broader scope than just rough sleeping.
Thank you. The reason I ask that is because we do have a large number of families placed in longer term temporary accommodation, temporary housing with families, and presumably they would rely on primary care arrangements when they're housed in those types of accommodation. So we're essentially talking about rough sleepers and the ones that I described earlier. So, but this I understand will be the only centre of its type across the BCP. Now, if that is the case, is it likely to attract homeless sleepers to the town centre of Bournemouth, for example? And if that is the case, how many people do you think just generally will be accommodated with the services provided there at that centre around the town centre? And also the last point is on the funding side of it. Is it likely that services currently contracted by the council, for example, some of the outreach services, will be reduced in order to fund the activities of this centre? Okay, I can see Councillor Lawton is shaking his head, and I'm very pleased to see that you are. But I just needed to make sure that the existing services will not be adversely affected financially by the provision of these services. So I don't know if you were able to answer the other elements of the question, but clearly, you will have some idea of the numbers of people that we'll be talking about. Could you answer that, please, Councillor Allen? Thank you.
We doubt that health provision alone would draw in people just to the town centre. However, having easy access to a front door hub will enhance and potentially speed up the process of reconnection if someone's out of area, or will hopefully speed up the process of them coming into emergency accommodation. So there's also the concern that we often have well-meaning local volunteers that get involved in supporting people that are homeless and entrenched rough sleeping, when they don't often know the background and they don't often know that there are safeguarding issues involved. So again, having that front door will hopefully allow people to feel that there's a easy point of access. We, as I say, we don't envisage it necessarily drawing more people into the area. I think if you were offering a very different offer around accommodation, then potentially that could be the case. And other areas have similar health provision. Thank you.
Thank you. If this is not the financial side, we'll take yours, Councillor Stripling, if that's okay.
Yes, it's not the financial side.
Okay.
I think this is, like other members, I think this is a really great initiative. And people in such a situation, whether it's their own fault or not, they do need a lot of help and support. Can we make sure that the local police stations and the 101 system actually know about it? About 3 years ago, I happened to be in Poole and saw a lady under in a sleeping bag under the Serpentine car park early evening. It was about 6:30. She was joined by a gentleman, and as I was leaving, she was joined by an 11 or 12-year-old child. And I was immediately concerned that they were rough sleeping and there was a child involved. I didn't have the council number. Maybe I should have done, but I didn't have the council number. So I phoned the police and spoke to Poole Police Station. They simply didn't want to know. And they gave me an emergency number, which I phoned, and that didn't come into operation until 9 o'clock at night. So there were 3 people, including a child, plainly rough sleeping in the middle of Poole. And I couldn't make contact for somebody just to go out and have a word with them and speak to them about it. So if we could please ensure that all the local police stations and the 101 system know the number, because if you've got an hour to wait for them to answer 101, I do hope that will improve shortly, but it used to be an incredible time. So I'm exaggerating, of course. Last time I called them, it was 56 minutes. But yeah, a great initiative, and let's make sure we can use it for those who need it.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Okay, I think we probably have to go under the thing now. So is that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act of 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 in part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs such interest in disclosing the information. All agreed? Thank you. Agreed. Okay, if you could stop the live stream, please. Thank you. We've come to the end of this debate now, and I think it's that members are generally supportive of what's happening here. In fact, fully supportive, not just generally, fully supportive. I think it's really welcome the initiative, and it does indicate how seriously BCP Council does take its responsibilities to reducing rough sleeping and homelessness. And we wish you all success with this project. And we look forward to seeing some really positive outcomes from it. So thank you very much for your presentation and your time at this meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and the committee. Thanks for all their input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we go to agenda item 11, request for scrutiny from a member of the public. This subject relates to the Overview and Scrutiny Board being asked to consider a request for scrutiny, and that issue relates to the Queen's Park Golf Course buggy policy. This has been brought to the committee by Councillor Derek Borthwick, but as a member of the public. He is not acting as a councillor under this item, this agenda item. But before we go into a debate on this, I would like to invite Councillor Iyengar to just say a few words on this. And as the portfolio holder responsible for the golf course, he would just like to say a few words. Thank you, Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. I'll literally just take a minute or so. I've had a good number of conversations and email exchanges with the resident, including receipt of documents and documents over a period of several months. As a background to this, I do want to just make very, very clear I'm emphatically against discrimination of any kind, whereby we treat a person or a group differently to others without a just cause. So that being the backdrop. Obviously, we know now the issue has been brought in front of Overview and Scrutiny, and I've seen all the officers' reports, as you have, of course, in regard to this matter. What I'd like to just confine my comments to is in enclosure 2, the buggy policy, the review, February 21. I note that in paragraphs 5 and 6, the summary, I think, of the officer's view on this is that the practice under discussion is deemed unsafe, and secondly, that a waiver around that practice will not absolve the council from liabilities. And that seems to be the nub of the position put forward from the officers. I think, leaving aside the second one, if I may just make a comment on the first of those two, which is about basically the practice being unsafe. I think my only comment is to lay in front of the members of Overview and Scrutiny to ask them possibly to consider in their thinking the test of reasonableness of it being deemed unsafe. And in asking that, all I'm saying is that I didn't find in the officers' reports a test of reasonableness of that being deemed unsafe. Firstly, vis-a-vis other users in Queen's Park, and secondly, vis-a-vis the use of many types of different users in other venues and open spaces across BCP. So that's the only question I put to the ONS for your own deliberation, please. The test of reasonableness of the practice which the resident is pointing to being deemed unsafe. A benchmark is needed, I think. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Iyengar. Before I open this open for debate, members, I'd just like to say that, basically we've got two options this evening. One is that we agree to put this on the forward plan. And the second option is that we don't agree to put it on the forward plan, but if we agree not to put it on the forward plan, we have to state our reasons for it. Okay, we're not here to debate the relative merits of what's being asked for. It is purely a question of whether we consider this item of work should be considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Okay, so just bear that in mind. It's about whether it goes on the forward plan or not. If it's not to, we need to say why. So having said that, members, I invite comment. Mr. Borthwick.
Well, I'm absolutely astonished, really, by a remark from officers who reported back about these buggies. They're used all over Europe. They're sold thousands of them, and they are specifically made to be a single-seater golf buggy to enable people to play golf on equal terms as those people who push their clubs along, because both items are an aid, really. You're carrying the equipment. I just would ask you to refer to the 7 principles of public known as the Nolan Principles. We feel our mental and physical health of us being disabled is an issue playing golf at Queen's Park Golf Club. You can't imagine that if we didn't have these buggies, we'd have packed up golf 7 years ago. We asked for a scrutiny on this management of the golf course affecting golfers aged over 80 years and 90 years of age. The buggy policy at Queen's Park needs to be updated to show that BCP Council acknowledges and respects the disabled. This can be achieved by accepting that a disabled golfer can play alongside those golfers using the traditional golf trolleys to carry their golf equipment, and no discrimination can take place. Because in my opinion, BCP are leaving themselves wide open to discrimination against disabled people, to reduce and don't forget that I have over 20 signatures, which I could have made 40, 80 signatures, of members of the club who state, we the undersigned senior golf players play golf at Queen's Park Golf Course. We would advise you for the past 18 months, our disabled golf section has been discriminated against under the BCP Equality and Diversity Act policy October 2009, plus the known 7 principles of public life. If this discrimination is allowed to carry on for one day alone, the council could itself be in breach of its own Disabilities Act. The disability golfers are being denied the opportunity to play golf while the course is being played on by golfers using golf carts. Therefore, the course is deemed playable. But BCP judgment is the council's course, leisure buggy, weighing some 800 pounds, and there is a claim that the disabled buggy is in the same calibration, which only weighs 120 pounds. We cannot understand why week after week the course is playable and the disabled golfers are not allowed to play. Disabled people should be in the front line for respect and diversity and equality. All we are asking for is any mechanical aid which is being used to carry golf equipment to play, then disabled golf scooters should be allowed to play at the same time. Because at the present time, we're not allowed to play if someone deems it's rained too much overnight. They've got no training on how the droplets fall out of the sky, measuring the actual rain. How can you say this about this course when anybody can go over there with an enormous buggy scooter, right, and ride anywhere on the course because the ground's the same? It's difficult. There's no separate thing anywhere. So I can take my disabled buggy, use it, go back to the clubhouse, get my, especially which cost over £2,000, and how people can say these things are not safe. It's absolutely ridiculous. They've never sat on one. They have no idea how these trolleys work, right? They've never asked about them. Only the fact that they turn up at 7 o'clock in the morning to see that you can play golf, but you can't, right? Because you've got a disabled buggy, you're not playing because we had rain overnight. And if you go to Queen's Park, you went there and left all these showers yesterday, There's not an inch of flooding anywhere. It's the best drain course for hundreds of miles around.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick.
Can I just quickly describe a golf buggy?
Councillor Borthwick, can I just hold you up now there, please?
Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, we're here to decide whether we put it on the forward plan or whether we don't, okay? And at the moment, you're going into all the detail that supports your case. That would form part of a debate that the ONS committee would go through should it be decided to discuss the issue amongst this committee. So at the moment, we're only deciding whether we should or should not put it on the forward plan. Okay, so we don't have to hear all of the evidence or supporting information that you want. And besides which, most of that has already been presented in the reports that we've provided, which members will all have read. Councillor, can I just bring in Councillor Kelsey, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Might I suggest that we put this on the forward plan for some time in the future? I think under the equalities and diversity, it's something that probably needs to be looked at. At the moment, we do not have any officers here from the Parks Department or from the golf courses to clarify. It would be worth just having a look at it, but I don't think it's something that needs to come to us at the next session or necessarily the session after, but we need to give officers time to prepare a full and proper report for us to probably even a noting report would probably be sufficient.
I'll come back to you on that in a minute if I may, Councillor Kelsey. Other people want to speak. Councillor Slade.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify options, because I know that if something is brought forward for scrutiny, it cannot be brought forward again within a year. And what I wouldn't want to do is to put it onto the forward plan when if there are other routes available for this to be considered, and then Mr. Borthwick, as he is today, wouldn't be able to bring it up again. Whether we could get clarity from our colleagues as to whether all other options have been exhausted, so that we can take it to scrutiny if that remains the only option. Otherwise, we might actually end up in a worse position. So just wondered if we could get clarity on that.
I can provide a degree of clarity here in that, and Councillor Borthwick has also mentioned it, in that they have, and his colleagues have raised a petition. And there is a separate petition process within the Constitution. And within that process, one of the outputs from that process is that it can be referred to the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Now, at the moment, what did I call it? No, the actual petition, sorry, senior moment. The petition process, I believe, is still in train. You have the required number of signatures for the petition process. And my suggestion would actually be to allow the petition process to go its way. And if they decide that it should come back to this committee at that point, that's what should happen. So for the time being, I would actually, because the option to come back to Overview and Scrutiny Board is still there. The other thing I would say is that if we were to ask for a report from officers, we would be asking the very same officers that have already carried out all the analyses and reports that we've already been presented with. And I'm not sure that there's any value in asking them to repeat the same process. Councillor Cox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking as a golfer who regularly uses a buggy, I feel quite qualified to talk on this subject. The issue, however, does seem to be one of equality, and therefore should we not ask for a report by the Cabinet Member for Equalities before we make any decisions?
Of course, the background information does already show that equality needs assessment has already been carried out by council officers in detail. And I think I'd ask Councillor Ianga just to comment on that. But if you look at the numbers of senior officers, this thing's been looked at incredibly closely, from the chief executive down to senior directors. The diversity inequalities manager and the Parks Department and the legal department in terms of liability in particular, and that's the key issue I think that Councillor Iyengar has raised, that waivers or dispensations or whatever does not relieve the council from the liability in terms of insurance liability that may arise should there be an accident. So, you know, this has been really looked at so closely, but there is a part of the procedure, as I've suggested, that remains in train, and that is the petition process, which could result in this matter being referred back to this board. But I would just like to ask Councillor Iyengar if he would like to comment on the issue about the equalities aspects.
Thank you, Chair. I think it probably isn't to add anything more than you've said, Chairman, which is the equalities assessment has been done by the officers. However, I wouldn't at this moment like to speak for the cabinet member in charge, and I don't know if she's present in the meeting to ask on this, but I know the officers' view, and the assessment has been done in their view completely. I'll still confine myself to the comment I made earlier, which is that I think that sort of test of reasonableness for the practice being unsafe itself could usefully be tested vis-a-vis other users of the course, and also what is actually commonplace in other venues across BCP as well, because that appears to be missing from the reports and, to my knowledge, from the analysis that was done. It may have been done, but it doesn't seem to be there. Thank you.
Can I say, Chairman, these vehicles only do 7 miles an hour?
Sorry, could you just hang on, please, Councillor Baldwick. Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In view of what you said earlier, I hadn't actually realised about the petitions process. So I think we should just continue along those lines. As you rightly said, if it's already in train, then there's no point doing two things on the same subject. Let's do the petition process first and see where we go from there.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems to me the issues are here. No, it is the reasonable test in relation to the equalities policy being applied properly. You know, is the actual equalities policy fit for purpose? You know, how does that relate to our obligation to do things within our insurance policy? And then there's the equalities issue. So aren't all these things related to governance? And isn't this a more appropriate thing for the Audit and Governance Committee to consider than this committee? I would have thought this is somewhat out of our scope of authority.
I'm not sure that I could agree with that, but there is an aspect of governance to it clearly. But I would like to propose actually that sorry. Councillor Fear. Oh, sorry, I missed you.
That's all right. Thank you, Chairman. No, I just kind of want to echo a few thoughts. And obviously what Councillor Howell's just said, I think the petitions route would be the best way to go with this. And then obviously we would then be able to see where it would be best place to go from there. And as Vice Chair of the Council would say, any petition is always welcome. So I think that would be the best place to send it, first of all. Thank you.
Okay, so you're suggesting then that the proposal is that we do not include it on the forward plan at this point, and the reason is that it's going through a petition process which could ultimately result in it being placed back with overview and scrutiny at some point in the future, depending on the outcome of the petition process. So you've proposed that. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kelsey. Is there any dissent from that proposal? In that case, that's agreed. We will not put it on the ONS forward plan at this point. We will wait the outcome of the petition process. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Iyengar and Chief Executive on that. Yes. Everybody okay? Yeah, okay. Which now brings us on to the next agenda item, which is the forward plan. I'm sure everybody's been poring over the forward plan. And I did, with the Vice Chair and Democratic Service, went and had a look at the Cabinet forward plan. And we then looked at what was coming up, and we've come up with some suggestions for items. And for this is for our next meeting. I'll come on to those in just a second. But there are probably a few things I'd like to just run over with that's on the plan at the moment and ask whether it still fits. So let me have a quick look at this. Has anybody incidentally got any thoughts about the forward plan? It's something that I always ask. And don't get a lot of response from, to be honest, but Councillor Howell has put his hand up. So let's just have your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I always respond with the same request, which is, can we have pool key kind of revitalisation, regeneration on there? I think that it's something obviously I have raised several times before. It's not on there. I think the only item that I can see relating to pool regeneration is a general item which is very near the bottom, which is not scheduled for a particular date. Unless I
Chair, on the action sheet, it did actually does state under 166 that the item was being added to our forward plan. So I think there I don't know if it's missing or if it's just somewhere else.
Just to clarify, that item is the item that you've referred to at the bottom, but I will make it that it's more specifically referred to pool key.
Yeah, just to be clear, obviously there's lots of things going on in terms of regeneration, and that, you know, I don't know whether it might be being postponed by the administration because they're under the perception that we want a briefing on everything and pool regeneration. It's not the case. Pool key has been left out of the regeneration kind of agenda so far because it's not really, there's no money obviously from associated developments which can be used to improve it. But in the context of, you know, Festival Coast Live and other events that we want to put on, it's important that we look at how that space can be upgraded to be, you know, a modern tourist use, a place that's attractive for tourists and where, you know, has electricity and all these other things that are necessary to meet modern, you know, events needs. And that's what I would like us to look into, to bring it up to the standard that of Plymouth and other places that have been through regenerating their quaysides.
Yeah, can I just clarify, there was an action, and is it that we haven't actually put it on the forward plan at this point, or I haven't included it on the forward plan? I haven't seen it, can't see it.
Sorry, there is an item included on the forward plan, but it refers to a more general revitalisation, regeneration of key tourism sites, I think.
Okay.
Rather than pool key specifically.
Let me see if I can find it.
So can I ask a question on that, Lindsay? Are you talking about the Cabinet forward plan or our forward plan? Because there is something on the Cabinet forward plan, but I don't know that I can see anything on our forward plan. This is
sorry, Councillor said, yeah, I was referring to the ONS board's forward plan, but perhaps it's not showing up there, so I'll just check that. But there was the intention to include that on there, and as you said, it's part of the action sheet, so it will be.
Okay. We will make sure it's on there, Councillor Howe. I'm sorry that it's not on there at the moment. I thought it certainly was on there last time. One of the issues here is that there isn't a specific pool key paper coming forward to Cabinet that I'm aware of, but there is a regeneration paper coming forward that as was mentioned to me only this morning, which is not yet on the Cabinet plan, but Councillor Broadhead has advised me that there is a paper coming out to Cabinet in June. So
yes, I mean, this all started, these requests, because we as a committee were going to look at things that weren't on the Cabinet agenda. We're going to look at things that we wanted to look at, and that I raised that in the context of that kind of item. So I'm still raising it on that basis because it does not seem that a Cabinet paper is coming forward to address that.
Okay, that's understood. So let me just clarify this. If there isn't anything coming forward, we will ask for a paper on that specific outside of the cabinet process. If there is a paper coming forward that we believe can suit your need, would that also be acceptable?
Yes, and I'm quite happy for other relevant sites to be included in, you know, as long as it doesn't push the process into the distance. But I think it's long overdue that this is looked at. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We will make sure it's on there. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. That was just to add to what Councillor Howell just sort of said in the general tourism thing, that we actually review all the events and festivals to bounce back later in the year as to how it went, and possibly, if we do get nice weather, crowd control on each. So it was just as a sort of a general one, not just specifically Pool Quay, but all the events and things that have been put on or regenerated in the BCP area.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. So I think what Councillor Howell says was about the regeneration aspects of Pool Quay rather than the functions. I think the functions are a result from the regeneration.
Yeah, Chair is correct. It's about the infrastructure that enables good quality events to be on, and so that's the fact that you've got paving that looks nice, you've got electricity that works for events people. It's that infrastructure which is important. Thank you. Not we want good events as well, but I think that's a separate discussion.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest, similar to Jackie actually, or Councillor Edwards, that my understanding is that the portfolio holder has advanced his thoughts on pool regeneration, and to incorporate the two by the Chair making special mention of that need to the portfolio holder. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Rigby.
It's all right, thank you. It's something completely different. It's something which is on the cabinet forward plan, but not ours. It's the PSPO public consultation results. I feel like as ONS, we've been really quite involved with that all the way through, and it'd be good to get eyes on that public consultation and maybe influence cabinet and give our feedback, getting early doors on that. If we could add it onto ours, I can't see it there for the next meeting it'd be.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rigby. Is the paper on the cabinet paper? Is it for June? Is it?
Yeah, I can see it on for the 23rd of June. It looks as though it's going to them.
Okay. At the moment, let me just tell you what we've got on the list. We've already got a fairly full agenda, so we need to decide what is important and what isn't. Well, it's all important, of course. It's a question of priorities, I guess. And this is just what's been suggested at the moment. Annual review of housing wholly owned companies. Recommendations following the public selected and additional licensing consultation. Council fleet replacement programme and sustainable fleet management strategy. The MTPF, or the MTFP even, financial update, which will include the discussion on the financial outturn report for 2020-21. The public space protection order, so it's already there. Okay. And then lastly, well, not lastly, approval of the BDC business plan. Additionally, we've already got planned 2 other items: road maintenance across the BCP area, and remember that was requested by Councillor Trent, and the tree management across the BCP area, which is also there. So we've already got a fairly full agenda. What's missing that's been asked for? PSPO we've mentioned. So I don't see anybody else putting their hand up for anything else. Now things can change, and they already, as I said, that Councillor Broadhead has raised one issue which is not on the cabinet plan, and that's about regeneration of high streets which will include pool, but whether it include the key area of it or not, I don't know at this point, because he just mentioned that to me. So these things do change as well fairly rapidly, I have to say, but in principle, if you're content with that for the next meeting, we'll go with that. If it changes, come along, then we'll let you know, and we'll take it from there. So I would say as well, you know, we need to start looking further ahead than the next meeting. So please pore over the cabinet papers, you know, even if it's for next year, because now I've actually seen an item in for 2023. It's the first one. The cabinet papers have not been looking forward particularly far, but now on the last iteration, it is actually going out quite far, which is good. So we need to look at that to see if we can get in on board as early as we can as well with those issues. So if there's no more comment on full plan, I think bring that to a close. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, we're finished with that then. So that's it, I think, isn't it? Yeah, I think we're at the end of the agenda item, so we can stop at 5 o'clock on the nail. How about that? Thank you very much, members, and I'll see you at 6 o'clock. Thank you.